Hi, thanks so much for being here. I don't really know what this YouTube channel is going to be in the long run. I just know that I've wanted to make a YouTube channel for a very long time where I can sit at the piano and share some of my observations from score study. So I appreciate you being here, and rather than go into a long explanation of what this channel is supposed to do and what my goal is, I think I'm just going to do it and let the explanation come with time. By the way, my name is Sam. I'm the assistant conductor of the St. Louis Symphony and the music director of the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra. A lot of the scores that are coming across my desk right now are pieces on the St. Louis Symphony season, and this piece is no exception. This is the Dvorak Cello Concerto, which will be in our penultimate subscription concert of this season. And I'm always so happy to come across this piece because I think there's an incredible amount of color, and I'd like to show you some of my favorite moments from this piece. The primary theme is already very special because it doesn't feel like it needs to go anywhere. It doesn't feel like it's striving to move in a new direction. Sort of two decorations on the right and the left of this tonic note. And the seventh scale degree isn't raised or anything, so we don't feel any kind of sharpness to the harmony. It's just kind of hanging out. What I love so much is that the closing zone of the exposition sort of turns that on its head. We have what feels like it will be the same theme, but then it eventually becomes more gravitational. So what used to be is turned into... Not only do we get what sounds like the raised seventh scale degree with this, but it's harmonized as the third of a G minor chord. So we come from a B minor chord and directly to a G minor chord where what we thought was scale degree 7, T, is now kind of the third of this chord. And the relationship between these two chords is not a tonal functional relationship. So Dvorak is kind of using this G minor chord as a sort of dominant chord. We come from B minor, and right when he gives us scale degree 7, the foil harmony, the opposing harmony to B minor, is this G minor chord, and then it goes back. So in a way, there's a home-away feeling to this B minor, G minor. And I love this about Dvorak. He uses this device all the time. I'm thinking of his 7th Symphony where the closing zone of the exposition does something very similar. We arrive at B flat major. And there's this foil harmony of F sharp minor between the B flat major, and it's the exact same relationship. Well, the only difference being that here the tonic is minor too. So a very colorful idea of how to make something sound like a dominant chord. There's a bit of character to it. There's a bit of gristle or maybe even spite to the depth of perhaps anguish that we feel when we get this dominant chord instead of... Doesn't sound like Dvorak anymore if we just play tonic dominant. So I adore that moment so much. Then of course we have one of the most beautiful secondary themes I think Dvorak wrote. And it ends with a gorgeous half cadence. So we have this period, and the second phrase ends on the dominant. It ends with this. Okay, a period that ends on a half cadence. We're wondering what the second half of the theme is going to be like. We have some other phrase needs to explain this dominant that we've ended on. And here's that explanation. time I hear this, I think to myself, this is so familiar. Why is this such a familiar idea? To begin the second half of a theme that ended on the dominant with a 2/6 chord, 2/6/5, and then to take that scale degree 4 that's in the bass, in this case it's a G, to keep it while the rest of the chord changes to the dominant. So it's now the 7th of the dominant chord in the bass. I thought to myself, why is that so familiar? And only this time seeing the piece did it dawn on me that this reminds me of Mi chiamano Mimì, this famous aria from Puccini's La Bohème. As soon as I thought of that, I said, okay, which one came first, the Cello Concerto or La Bohème? Which composer was listening to the other? And the crazy thing is that the Cello Concerto is 1894, La Bohème, Puccini started in 1893 and ended in 1895. I don't think it's possible that either composer knew the other piece. If anything, maybe Puccini wrote this aria, Mi chiamano Mimì, before the Cello Concerto, but I don't think that Dvorak would have known the beginnings of the opera before it was finished in 1895. So maybe they didn't have each other's piece in their ear, but I think it's a testament to the sort of almost universal quality of the late Romantic composers and how they express themselves through richness of harmony. If you don't know the moment in the aria that I'm thinking of, it's actually in the exact same key. Mimi has just sung about her sort of simple lifestyle where she lives in relative solitude, and there's a phrase that ends with a bit of a half cadence. And the dominant. So the question is, what happens next? And it goes to a 2/6 chord. If I trusted my own voice, I would sing it. I'm not going to sing it. But she sings, Ma quando vien lo scelo, when the frost dissipates. The first sun is mine. The first kiss of April is mine. It's one of the most powerful moments, I think, of the whole opera. And if you've ever heard La Bohème or seen it, this moment is it just sticks in your brain because of the richness of the harmony. It's like the same thing as what Dvorak wrote here. So we have this second phrase. That's Dvorak. Puccini was... Okay. Then Dvorak says... And eventually, in the third phrase, Puccini says... So we have the same relationship between this 2/6/5 chord and the dominant. It just feels like they're the same to me. I don't know if that's something other people feel as well. But what's remarkable is that the Puccini is clearly this hugely expressive moment where Mimi is talking about, but even though I'm alone and I have this simple life, when that first bit of sun comes over the horizon on the first true day of spring, it's mine. I own it. It's for me. And she's talking about this with the most beautiful radiance. This moment in the Dvorak almost feels a bit more introspective. And it's not until here where Dvorak writes animato that the final closure of the phrase is the most rhapsodic. But, I mean, what a Puccini ornament there. It's just a moment of indulgence for me to talk about that passage. Speaking of that late romantic idiom, I think there's something so Tchaikovskyan, is that a word? About Dvorak's development in this first movement. After rehearsal 9, there's this breakthrough moment that reminds me of Tchaikovsky. I guess I'm thinking of his 4th symphony. In the development of the first movement of Tchaikovsky's 4th symphony, there's this, it goes like... the harmony changes, the melody pushes through one more step and generates another note. It's like there's a melodic ceiling, and the music keeps generating all of this energy that bursts through the melodic ceiling to another height. I think there's a moment that works in the same way in Dvorak's development. Just after rehearsal 9, there's this woodwind moment. So we have a ceiling of B flat from the flutes, that high note. And then the next bar breaks through from the B flat to C flat. And it doesn't just break through to the C flat, but the C flat is the minor 13th of this chord. I mean, it's an appoggiatura to the B flat, but it feels like it's, for a moment, this incredible extension to... It's like a Chopin chord. But then when the cellist finally enters at rehearsal 10, we have this lead-in from the orchestra. Has now entered with a very extended version of the primary theme. It's almost lonely and very inward, not outwardly anguished and exclaiming like rehearsal 9 was. But the transition into 10 is so incredible. The second violins, bar before 10. The second violins give us a moment of belief that maybe we'll actually end in A flat major. But before the downbeat, they already tell us it was a lie. And they fall to the C flat. Now it's very possible Dvorak could have lifted them back up to the C natural at the downbeat of 10. It's silly because we know he doesn't do that, but he could have. I think when we're performing, when we're analyzing, and when we're choosing how to phrase things, there needs to be enough time and sound on the C flat to convince us that it's harmonic, that it's not a lower neighbor of something to be resolved up to the C natural, but that it's real. And then this beautiful set of harmonies. Unbelievable. I'd be remiss not to talk a bit about the other movements, so let me go take a look at the second movement. We have a pretty simple opening idea that has one moment of shock towards the end. moment of sun that bursts through an otherwise quite sunny theme with this bright ray of energy towards the end. It's a 7 major triad, F sharp major triad in the context of G major. Very strange. There's no real way to think about it. If anything, it would have to be 5 of 3, maybe. But the distance between that and the tonic is so far. We're not really calculating that. It's not what happens afterwards. We just go straight from this F sharp major chord to the D dominant 7th chord, the 5/7 chord, keeping the F sharp as a common tone to kind of make sense of the transition. And these two notes, the A sharp and the C sharp, just have to move down a half step, and then we add in a D in the bass to justify it. So it's a voice leading relationship, but it really does feel like a burst of energy or garish brightness in the middle of an otherwise very pastoral theme. I don't think it's a coincidence that the same ray of sunshine happens in the second movement of Beethoven's Violin Concerto. It's the same key. It's in G major, and it begins just as simply as this theme begins. There's that F sharp major chord out of nowhere. But in the case of Beethoven, he walks us back through all of the tonal relationships. Beautiful. Dvorak doesn't walk us back. He starts from this F sharp and through voice leading kind of magic tricks his way back just in time for the cellist to enter. It's a beautiful way to add a little color to an otherwise very simple theme. Well, the cellist enters and says, okay, that's great. I love this theme, but the cellist kind of ends it a little bit early. The cellist shortens the theme, and then we get rehearsal 1 where the orchestra presents a new idea, specifically the clarinets. Only has these commentaries at the end of each clarinet phrase, as if to say, that was really beautiful, clarinets, good job. So the cellist is taking a back seat almost right away in the second movement, while the clarinets introduce this new colorful idea, and I mean, come on. What's better than that? Is there anything better than that? I don't think there's anything better than that. That's the best thing there is. But the second movement isn't all just flowers and roses and nice things. There's a lot of depth of color, sort of maybe spurred by that schism of F sharp major in the opening theme. That kind of chromatic idea rears its head later in the movement, and we get some of that complex Dvorak harmony. Measure 61, we have this beautiful dissolution at the end of a phrase where the cellist is trying to cadence in D flat major, but accidentally cadences in B minor. Think about how distant D flat major is from B minor. There's no tonal relationship whatsoever between these two keys, especially when they're spelled as they are, as D flat major and B minor. There's quite a distance to travel. And Dvorak has the cellist make this jump so easily. Enters very fatefully in this B minor, the tonic key of the first movement, that minor key that we want to kind of fix. We want to avoid falling back into the depths of B minor. It was a very anguished key when we had especially all that kind of darkness from the first movement's treatment of B minor. Unfortunately, the cellist has accidentally wandered into B minor again in the middle of this second movement. And that's a great narrative device that Dvorak is using to inject this otherwise pastoral movement with depth, with gravitas, maybe with a little bit of fatefulness. As the movement goes on, it's one of those beautiful things Dvorak falls back on time and time again, is this dissolving movement feeling. Like as the movement is getting closer and closer to its end, it's just sort of losing the corners, it's losing the edges, and it becomes thinner and thinner textures, more and more reflective and inward. So now that anguish from the middle of the movement, that B minor flash, we're resolving all of these things and traveling back to our sweet inner peace. So at rehearsal 6, we have an echo of that opening pastoral theme from the beginning of the movement. Now it's played by piano horns, sounding very distant and very sweet. Distant in tone quality, but inside one's own imagination in character. It's a very interesting kind of juxtaposition of sound that's far away, but we can imagine it's our own minds making it up. And it's only accompanied by cellos and basses in this very light pizzicato and arco kind of texture. Originally it went to the tonic, but here there's a deceptive cadence with the arco cello basses on this triplet D sharp. Then we breathe and continue. Almost like a Bach chorale. Level of harmonic adventurousness of Bruckner. And then we give way completely to the cellist for a little cadenza with a little bit of woodwind accompaniment. And the music continues to dissolve away in this very Dvorak style at the end of the movement. Until finally, right before the final G major measures, there's one last schism of surprising harmonic color. So we have the bass trombone, tuba, clarinet, and bassoon for measure 157. They're playing this very deep G major chord, as if to say, the end, we're here. And against this, the cellist plays. But then, so we think, okay, we had a moment of B minor, that fateful key from the first movement that appears suddenly in measure 158 as a 3 chord. But okay, it's fine. The cellist then went on a mini cadenza and ended on a G trill. So surely we can just finish in G major now, right? Dvorak? Come on. No. We get a 6 chord, E minor. Neapolitan 6th chord. From this E minor chord, we go E minor, A flat major. Now, the Neo-Riemannian fans out there might know this relationship as the hex pole. It's the relationship between a chord and a chord of the opposite modal coloring, so minor to major or major to minor, where all of the notes are only a half step apart. There's only one way to move every note of a chord by 1/2 step and get a chord of the opposite modal coloring. There's a lot more depth of theory to this kind of relationship, a lot more discussion about it. What's interesting to me at this moment is that all of these notes are so close to one another, but the tonal relationship is so far. We go from a 6th chord to a Neapolitan 6th chord. And actually that exact same connection of two chords, E minor to A flat major, is the opening of Strauss's Metamorphosen, which is all about these uncanny relationships, this sort of disenchantment with the world because of being incapable of relating to it. Everything is changing around you or inside you, and nothing makes any sense. Piece is a masterclass in harmonic surprise with very little motion of the voices. And the opening two chords is a perfect demonstration of that, and they're the same chords that Dvorak calls upon here. Before resolving to a pentatonic descent in the cello, which is as placid and ungravitational as you can possibly get. The pentatonic collection doesn't have any of the leading tones or half steps of a major scale, so we remove all of the gravity pulling us outside of this bubble of G major. But only after this beautiful schism that happens underneath that final resolution. Incredible masterclass for composers everywhere. So I'd rather this video not be, 7 hours long. So I think for the first video of this channel, I'll just mention a very similar effect that happens in the third movement. During this dissolution period that Dvorak seems to always go to for his closure. We see it in the second movement of this concerto, as I mentioned. We see it in his 8th symphony, where you have this very prolonged dissolution. Everything's getting slower and quieter, and then all of a sudden, a final coda, etc. So there's something very similar that happens in the third movement of the concerto. We have this beautiful theme from measure 421 that shows us just how much Dvorak had Wagner in his ear. We hear something that sounds like the Dresden Amen as it appears in Parsifal. Now the only thing different is that 4 chord should have traveled to the 1 chord by way of this ascending passage to make it truly the Dresden Amen. But it's harmonically so reminiscent with this strangely decorated plagal cadence built into it. From this 2-6-5 chord to the 1 chord. And again. Now, if I actually play all the stuff in here, you'll hear the cellist now has that ascending line from measure 429. Let me see if I can play all of it. Here's the cellist. It's not the same notes as in the Dresden Amen, but it's the same pattern. dissolution, just listen to this idea of going back and forth between a 1 chord and a 4/6 chord. It's crazy. So listen to what happens at measure 489. We have an alternation between the tonic and a minor 4 chord, but with the major 7th on top. It's the 3rd scale degree of the key, so the cellist is just kind of hanging out on mi on scale degree 3, the D sharp, while the minor 4 chord is happening underneath. There's a little bit of that almost languishing emotion inside of staring out the window and just reflecting on one's own inward somberness or solitude or whatever it might be as things get thinner and thinner at the dissolution of the movement. Then it happens again, but it's different. So this time, the minor 4 chord has the cellist move down to the natural 3rd scale degree. And that little bit of coloristic difference of just a half step difference between the first time and the second time, that is the whole world for Dvorak. That is everything. The cellist then sustains scale degree 5. The orchestra plays 1, natural 3, some modal mixture from B minor. It's the major 3 chord from B minor, but it's from B minor. Strange. 6/7 from B minor as well. The 2 major chords that you can most easily conjure up from the minor key that we attempted to conquer and thought we were done with. We were done with B minor. We have all this B major at the end of this phrase, but we go from B major to these 2 major chords only found in the minor key. And they're just pizzicato morendo in the strings. So they're dying away, they're extremely quiet while the cellist sustains this scale degree 5. And what do we expect after this 6 chord? Well, we should have some kind of harmonic explanation that brings us back from 6 to the tonic. Dvorak doesn't give us that explanation. It just travels back to the tonic from this 6/7 chord. So it's as though all of the harmonic distance, that cadence, whatever we would need, we have to imagine it. It's like it happens in the silence of those 2 bars. And I love that at rehearsal 15, the downbeat has this tremolo between C double sharp and D sharp. And harmonically, that's just the minor 3rd and the major 3rd in the first violins. So it's almost as though there's a little bit of a blur between B minor and B major. It's kind of brought on by this weird modal mixture of just preceding. And then this blur eventually clarifies into a glorious Dvorak kind of stamp that he gives us at the end. So the final harmonic relationship of the piece is between B major and A major over a B pedal. Back to B major. It's again this Dvorak thing of finding a weird harmony as the foil to the tonic. So we heard it in the closing zone of the first movement. It's not actually the dominant chord, but it kind of behaves like one. We've gone away from the home and then we've come back to home. In this idiom, at the end, this big triumph at the end of the 3rd movement, I can't help but think about the end of his 9th symphony, which ends with a very similar tonic, foil, tonic relationship, this pillar at the end of the 9th symphony. We have E major, descends back to E major. Now there's a tonic pedal underneath, but the chord changing above is between E major and D half diminished seventh. Now you cannot tell me that there is a meaningful relationship between the tonal gravity of D half diminished seventh, which if anything is like a 2 chord in C minor, or maybe it's a 7 chord in E flat major, but there's no connection to E major at all, except for the fact that the voices don't have to move much to get from one to the other. So Dvorak adds gravitas to the end of his pieces so often with these grand schisms of harmony between. And here where we have as the final harmonic statement of the concerto. Thank you so much for being here and for watching this first video. As I said, I don't necessarily know exactly where this channel is going to go, but rather than calculate out a very detailed plan before I do anything, I just wanted to start by making a video. So here we are. I guess I should say all the things. Subscribe if this was interesting, or if you want to see more or connect more about orchestral music. And leave a comment if any of this was interesting, surprising, helpful, or if there are particular things you might like to see me explore from the orchestral repertoire at the piano like this in conversation. I am totally down to hear all of your ideas, and I guess I'd be excited to see a little community come together of people who are really interested in the details of orchestral music, in the stories, in the colors, in exploring things with curiosity. So if you think that you have a friend who might enjoy this video or this channel, feel free to share it with them, and hopefully we'll have a nice little community of people who all love to talk about music. Thanks. See you next time.